Thank you all for joining us for the second session of Resistance School. Woo! We're so excited to have you here with us tonight. In our inaugural session last week, Dr. Timothy Patrick McCarthy kicked us off with an inspirational seminar on effective communication for social change. Professor McCarthy showed us what it looks like to ground our political advocacy in values-based communication. He led us through the process of articulating the principles that are core to our identities, a process that's been fundamental for the progress of movements over the course of history. Professor McCarthy urged us to ask ourselves not just what our values are, but where they come from. So many of you shared those values with us in preparation for tonight's session. We heard from one of you who expressed the value of justice. You described how this was instilled through many generations living on the border of poverty and success, in the crossroads of life with and life without. A woman in rural Michigan wrote about how a lifetime of faith-based organizing has inspired her commitment to nonviolence and inclusivity. And another wrote, "We are minorities, Hispanic and women, but don't walk with our heads down. We like to tell truth from fiction. We do our homework, extra credit too, before we cast a vote." These are just three of many profound examples that you shared with us. Those personal narratives lay the foundation for our session tonight, in which we'll move from articulating who we are to what we organize for. We are honored and incredibly excited to be joined by Sara EL-Amine, who will be leading us through a training on electoral and issue-based advocacy. Her session tonight will equip us to act persuasively and strategically in taking collective action. Sara EL-Amine is one of the foremost leaders on grassroots and digital advocacy. A 9-year veteran of the Obama grassroots movement, she was recently the executive director of President Obama's advocacy arm, Organizing for Action. There, she mobilized 250 local chapters on issues ranging from the implementation of the Affordable Care Act, gun violence prevention, immigration reform, marriage equality, and climate change. She raised over $20 million and oversaw the creation of digital content for President Obama's massive social media following. Not an easy task. Sara is best known for the techniques and tactics that she pioneered during the 2012 election as the National Director of Training for President Obama's re-election campaign. She's worked midterm and presidential elections in 37 states and dozens of issue and electoral campaigns. Sara is also the author of the Obama Organizing Handbook, which extended the grassroots model to 20,000 neighborhood teams and thousands of other staff. She currently runs a training and consulting practice where she and her team help civic tech startups, new grassroots groups, and Fortune 500 companies to scale their programming and deepen their engagement and impact. We're beyond excited to have Sara here with us tonight. After Sara finishes up, we'll have a brief question and answer session until around 8:30 p.m. Eastern Time. For that portion of the event, we'll be fielding questions from all of you via Twitter. So please feel free to tweet us at @resist_school. And just a quick final note, Resistance School is an independently organized project developed by students at Harvard University. It is not an official course or offering of Harvard University or any of its schools. So unfortunately, as much as we'd like to, we can't offer class credit. And now, please join me in thanking and welcoming Sara EL-Amine to Resistance School.
Thank you.
Great work, thank you.
Oh my goodness! I am so excited to be here with all of you tonight in person in beautiful Cambridge, in my home state. I grew up in Duxbury, just down Route 3, and then even more with the tens of thousands of people who are tuning in with us from across the world. Le Monde in France just wrote an article about Resistance School, fancy pants, today. I want to first start off by giving a really heartfelt welcome to the incredible student organizers who put together today's session. So let's give them a quick round of applause. Some snaps from online. As Clara said, I've been a professional organizer for a decent amount of time. There's like a really high burnout rate with professional organizers, so 10 years is actually a really long time. I cannot tell you how many professional organizers I've had email me and reach out to me and say that Resistance School is answering a calling that they have felt and have tried to fix, a gap that they've tried to address for literally decades. And the fact that there's a bunch of first year and some second year Kennedy School students who came together and decided, really, I think it seems like with like 3 or 4 weeks notice, that they were going to actually connect academia and practitioners together to present to the big wide world real conceptual overviews and tactical tools for grassroots organizing and community engagement is just a testament to this particular group of people who organized today. So I wanted to start off with a big thank you to all of them. So we are here, for those of you who are just joining, in a room in Cambridge with a fantastic crew of people live. And we also have a ton of folks joining us from live stream across the world on Twitter, on Facebook. We will be taking questions. And I'm really workshoppy and interactive. I refuse to apologize for that. We'll be taking questions throughout, largely on Twitter and here in person. So if you have a question or a point of clarification, or I speak too quickly, which tends to happen because I get really excited, feel free to go online if you're on the live stream and make a comment, tweet at me. We'll be checking them throughout. Or just raise your hand or do this a little bit, and I'll recognize that I got a little too overexcited and I need to slow down. But with that, I think we're done with some of the disclaimers, and I'm really excited to spend the next hour and a half really trudging deep into the trenches with all of you now that you got a fancy pants Harvard professor overview last week. So here we go. Are you guys ready? Yeah, okay, rock and roll. Let's do this. I'm actually going to get in a second to the agenda and the goals. Any good organizer has agenda and goals. But what I really want to start with is why the heck should you listen to me? What expertise do I actually have that makes me qualified to speak at Harvard Kennedy School about this topic? Why am I here? Why do I even care about this work? So I want to start with a little bit about why I do this work and what it is that I do. So my dad, who is in the back row of the room here, is a war refugee from Lebanon. And he left Lebanon when he was 17 years old because his university closed, and made his way to Germany and then Spain and put himself through undergraduate school and then grad school or medical school because the opportunities for education were really violently taken away from him because of a civil war in his home country, because of the fact that people couldn't figure out how to speak across the aisle to people who disagreed with them. My mom is an Irish Catholic Longmeadow High School graduate from here in Massachusetts, whose family was so conservative that she was only allowed to go to an all-girls Catholic college when she went to school. So naturally, she graduated from college, and she took a solo bike tour of Western Europe. I think she got in a lot of trouble and basically had no money the whole time. Met my dad. They didn't really speak the same language. They fell in love in this really charming way, drawing on napkins, and they weren't able to speak the same language in a cafe in Barcelona, of all places, where I was also born. So the order of all those things is a little mixed up in my head. So I grew up randomly, after having been born in Barcelona, as this half Irish, half Lebanese, strange mix of people. I mean, I look it. I grew up in this tiny conservative town in Massachusetts called Duxbury. I did not know, fun fact, I'm going to talk about a lot of things I don't know tonight because I think that's really important. I did not know that Duxbury was a liberal town until I was about 17, because it is so homogenous that being a Catholic in Duxbury is kind of a big deal, let alone being a half Irish, half Lebanese Muslim kid who is from a mixed family and goes to Lebanon summers and really likes Chiclets gum. The whole thing. So when I was growing up, the news that was on the background in my family was Al Jazeera. And it wasn't Al Jazeera because my parents really cared a lot about, I don't know, the stock market prices or how the Dow Jones was performing. It was Al Jazeera via this huge satellite that sat on top of our house because we were really trying to understand what was happening to the security and safety of our family in Lebanon. who was going through just tremendous regional conflict, one war after another after another. And so when September 11th happened, I have many stories around September 11th, including getting pulled into the principal's office, the vice principal's office, in my little small town in Duxbury, because I was smiling in the hallway the day after September 11th. And my vice principal wanted to know where my allegiances lay. When I went to college, naturally, I felt like this was a thing that I needed to understand better and I needed to work on. So I took a course on diplomacy. I majored in diplomacy and world affairs. And I spent a summer in my junior year. Of course, you guys will see, like you who are tuning into this and listening in person, I like to challenge conflicts head on. I decided that I wanted to spend a summer in Cyprus with a bunch of Arab American kids, Arabs, Jewish American kids, and Israelis, really understanding the Palestinian-Israeli conflict, which I felt was at the very center of a lot of the different regional dynamics that had been affecting my family personally. And I knew that if I couldn't get through this gunk, and like a lot of my biases and my preconceptions and my misunderstanding of the other side, quote unquote, personally, that I had no chance as an advocate or a problem solver in the region. So I went to Cyprus. I spent 3 beautiful months in the beaches of Cyprus with these amazing young people. I dated this very cute Jewish boy. Baba, cover your ears. We solved the Israeli-Palestinian conflict together in simulation and over beer, and it was like this amazing, epic, life-changing experience, as I'm sure many of you have had here at Harvard yourselves, or whatever schools you went to or go to now. And I remember driving home on the way back from that summer in Cyprus with my mom and my dad in the car and my younger brother, and thinking, I can change the freaking world. I have the key. These problems, they're logistical. They are logistical problems, and I have enough charm to fix them. This is gonna work. We can do this together. 3 short weeks later, I landed at my internship that I had lined up for the fall after my junior year, the fall of my senior year, at the United Nations headquarters in New York City. And this, as you can tell from like the enthusiasm in my voice, it doesn't really go away, but the current enthusiasm in my voice, this was like the pinnacle of my college experience. I was going to the United Nations. I had just spent the summer solving the Middle East conflicts, all of them, and I was gonna take my ideas to the halls of power as an intern and change the freaking world. And there's some giggles in the audience, but it's okay. I was 21. And I got there, and 2 short weeks after I started my internship at the United Nations in my oversized marshal's suit, war broke out again in 2006 between Lebanon and Israel this time. And 2 weeks after war broke out between Lebanon and Israel, and I had this cute Jewish boyfriend who was now very problematically in Israel, and my family was in Lebanon, and that was the whole thing. My family got the phone call that no family wants to get, that I had an 11-year-old cousin who was playing in his backyard in our family farm in southern Lebanon and was killed by a missile, by a US-funded Israeli missile. And there I was, literally sitting inside the halls of power at the United Nations International Headquarters in New York City. And I just have never felt more powerless in my whole life. And I'm ashamed to say, I finished out the internship and I went on my merry way down the path that many disenchanted activists go down towards law school. And I was actually temping. I had a temp job right up the street. Like, this is like, could not be more full circle. I had a temp job right up the street at the Harvard Career Services Center as I was trying to wrap up my LSATs and deal with my broken heart and my shattered sort of international perspective and framework. And someone lent me the book. This is 2007, The Audacity of Hope. Anyone heard of that book? It's actually the worst of the 2 Obama books. Dreams of My Father is way better. But I was this dorcas 22-year-old who just had my heart broken. And I stayed up literally all night reading this book. And I just highlighted passages. And in my brain, there was something that came together that I can only identify now, because when you're in the midst of these moments, you don't really know what's happening. But in my brain, it was like the UN had made me give up on institutions. Like, I'd invested in people, and that worked, and then I went into this big, massive international institution, was like, they passed resolution after resolution after resolution during the Lebanon 2006 war. And literally none of them were relevant to the situation that was happening on the ground there. They passed a resolution finally to ban landmines, which had nothing to do with my cousin's death. So I'd given up on institutions, but then I read this book and I said, what if I was focusing on the wrong institution? What if the UN is actually like, I hesitate to say this because I don't think the UN's actually feckless, but I think they can be feckless. What if the UN is the wrong institution to be focusing on? And the fact that we have a US president in George W. Bush at that point in 2007, who's kind of leading the international sort of international policy, foreign relations framework, what if that's the actual problem? So I decided, like really off the cuff, basically the day after I stayed up all night reading this book, that I was going to quit my job, borrow my best friend's car, and drive to Iowa. Which, like, I'm from Massachusetts, so Iowa is like, I don't know, it's like Japan to me. Like, Iowa was very foreign. Drive to Iowa to see what I could do for the Barack H. Obama primary campaign. So I show up in the old ice skating rink that is the headquarters in 2007, when there's like 20 scrappy staff that have no idea what's going on, really early on, when Hillary Clinton was probably 20 points ahead. And showed up, but they put me to work. I ate a lot of cereal. I slept on someone's unfinished basement floor. My poor mother, I had like $200 in my bank account for many, many months and ate cereal obsessively. I'm sure I still have malnutrition from it. And I got absolutely hooked on grassroots organizing. And I understood in this really visceral, different way that I think international advocacy doesn't give you access to in the same way. And I hope that tonight we can light some fires under people's under people's seats on the same front. But I understood really viscerally that part of the thing that had been a disconnect for me during my time doing international advocacy and organizing was that I didn't feel like I was organizing my own community. And when I joined the Obama campaign in Iowa, even though I wasn't an Iowan, I focused a lot on training. I focused on helping people learn how to caucus. We won the Iowa caucus way back in the day, which was a huge, do folks remember that? Huge surprise, huge upturn. And then I went to Idaho and Texas and Mississippi and Indiana and Colorado and Virginia. And I kept organizing these communities that weren't my own. And I would go to these doors of people who lived in rural Virginia or lived in Mississippi, and they had Confederate flags at their front doors. And as a little organizer, like, I was scared out of my britches to go knock on that door and talk to that person. But I did, because they were on my list and I knew I had to time and time again. And what surprised me, not every single time, but almost every single time, was that when you drop your shoulders and you smile and you listen to someone and you actually meet them human to human with real, genuine respect that's not feigned respect, that's not like some talking points about your values. It's a real acknowledgement of them as another human being across the doorstep from you in many cases. You can change more minds than you even imagined. And I also realized, sometimes the hard way, that half the minds we have to change are minds that in other contexts I would have totally disrespected and disagreed with. And so my big mission, I've gone on to do all sorts of crazy things. I sort of accidentally became the training director for the Obama grassroots movement and wrote the handbook on grassroots organizing because there were so many cool things that we were doing, pulling from Marshall Gans, pulling from a lot of the smart people in these halls, pulling from the Dean campaign. There were so many things we were doing that we knew we needed to codify. So I accidentally became the national training director, and I worked on the healthcare fight. I ran it in Arizona, helped pass healthcare reform. We thought it would take 3 months. Took 13, it was sort of a thing. But what I realized is that we don't have equal opportunity access to our democracy in this country. At the end of the day, we don't. It's hard to register to vote. It's hard to figure out how to volunteer on purposes and causes that matter to us. it's hard to understand how the freaking Electoral College works. How many people out here actually understand how the Electoral College works? I barely understand it. I'm like a political professional. Raise your hands. Actually, raise your hands. Because I'm going to call on you if you say you understand it. Okay, half the hands went down. Great, exactly. It's really weird. We have the strangest electoral, we have the strangest democracy you could possibly imagine. And it genuinely takes grassroots organizers to help average citizens organize it. So the reason that I'm here tonight, the reason that I'm so excited to have this session with all of you, is that I've worked in every political context you could possibly imagine at this point. I've worked in electoral campaigns and primary campaigns. I've worked in grassroots upstart movements. I worked in big institutional. I ran the president's nonprofit when he was in the White House, his advocacy arm outside of the White House. And what I realized in this beautiful full circle way through all of that work is that no matter how strong these institutions are, whether the institutions are the UN or they're the White House, they are built functionally to not be able to do the same things or have the same power that you as average citizens hold and can wield, period. And so my huge, crazy mission in the past year since I left the Obama grassroots movement, but really genuinely when I was a part of the Obama grassroots movement too, was to try to give average citizens back that power that institutions have usurped for far too long. And the only way that you can really grab onto the power is if you understand what the heck you're fighting against. So that is my goal of the session today. We're going to talk about electoral advocacy, some of the things you might not know about electoral advocacy. We're going to talk about issue advocacy, how the two are connected, but how campaign finance rules make it such that the two must be really professionally divided, and you as citizens are blocked out from actually engaging meaningfully in your democracies. We're going to fight that. And then we're going to finally dig into persuasion. How many people here have had, or how many people online, you can type in the chat, have had some awkward conversations since November? There's a reason I'm wearing black. We're just in mourning a little bit. No, I'm truly bipartisan. I'm wearing black because our democracy has died, not anything else. So persuasion is like a real thing. And how many people here or online, type in or raise your hands, have felt a little unequipped for those persuasion conversations? Yeah, it's really hard. And how many people here are policy experts? I'm curious. I mean, we're at Harvard. There's some policy experts. It's okay. You can out yourselves. Okay, great. Cool. There's a few of them. So there's not actually a lot of policy experts in the real world. And it's a thing. But we as humans actually have to engage in persuasive conversations if we're going to weave back the fabric of our democracy that we are in mourning for because it is broken, because we haven't done this right for the past couple years. So we're just going to solve all of that in the next hour and a half. It's going to be great. I'm really excited to be with all of you today. But what I really want to do as we get started, I've told you who I am. I've told you why I care about this stuff, why this is super personal to me. This is my personal crusade. I'm curious to hear what brought you guys into the room? Let's hear, and I say room like a Massachusetts person. I'm going to keep pointing that out because I'm really proud to not be made fun of for once in a room of people who say it like I do. So let's hear from folks. Raise your hands in the room or online. Why did you come to today? Yes, and what is your name and where are you from? And I think we have a mic. Oh, great. There is a microphone next to you. How convenient.
It's on. Excellent. Hi. Nice to meet you, Sarah. My name is Nina Vaden. I am an organizer with Indivisible Somerville. This is my first time organizing anything, so it's brand new. We've got 1,000 people now. It's pretty insane. The reason what sort of got me into this and got me doing something about it is, so I'm Ukrainian. I was born in Ukraine. I'm an immigrant with immigrant parents who have, very thick Ukrainian accents. Mm-hmm. And one of the stories my mom told me right after Trump got elected was about Russian influence on Ukraine and Putin's influence on Ukraine. And she was like, there are so many similar patterns. And it was, to me, heartbreaking. Mm. I had to, I was in tears and I had to ask her to stop because some of the things she was saying was I can't believe this is real. Mm-hmm. And at that moment, I just realized, I'm not going to sit back and let this happen.
Yeah.
Yep.
Beautiful.
Thank you.
Snaps and claps for our wonderful thing. You don't want to see history repeat itself. That's a real thing. Who else? Yep, in back here. And I think there's a mic runner that's going to give you a mic.
Well, And I woke up on...
And what's your name? Sorry.
I'm Kathleen.
Kathleen, hi.
And I woke up on November 9th. It kind of registered with me that my son was going to be draft age during this presidency. And I was the check writing, voting, occasionally knock on doors activist. And I have a smallish Facebook group, and I woke up that morning and at about 5 to check the headlines, and I sent out a message saying, okay, I'm gonna fight, does anyone wanna do it? And we had 10,000 people online in 2 weeks, and so it was, and it's not an indivisible group that we totally wanna work with you guys, but it's just, but one of the things that really has struck me is on a town level, like we have town elections in Massachusetts right now, people can't find out who's running.
Yes.
They can't get their ballots. They don't know where they vote. They don't, like, people are like messaging me and saying, do you know which of the selectmen running is the progressive candidate and who's not? So there's no information, and it's very, very hard to get.
Yeah.
So, when you're talking about, it's hard to vote, I think people think about other states, and it's right here. So I think there's a lot to do in Massachusetts.
If not now, when? If not me, who? Yeah, you
Exactly.
felt called. That's so real. Let's hear from another person over on this side. I think we have someone in the front row here. I think we're hanging out with our live stream buddies. Hi, live
Hi,
stream guy.
my name's Shauna, and I feel like I'm 20. I'll be 29 in June, so I am like smack dab in the middle of the millennial generation, which everybody says is we're lazy and we're entitled and we don't care and we're selfish. And I feel like people my age that I know are some of the hardest working people around. And I woke up the day after the election and I had a really rough night. And I'm a straight, white, upper middle class woman in Massachusetts. My rock bottom, not that bad. The rock bottom for some of my friends, literally their lives are on the line. And it occurred to me, I'm the adult now. Like, the people I thought were in charge, the people I thought I could trust, failed. And I am the only person who can save my friends. Or I have to at least try.
I have shivers. When are you running?
I'm trying to buy a house so that I can have property.
Oh my
as
gosh.
a landowner,
You're
that
a
can't
real
keep me
millennial.
out.
Hashtag. We're doing this. I'll find you later. Let's get one more person in the middle. What about in the middle? Some folks, you're like in the actual physical middle here. Like, I feel like you need to speak up. You're the Americans we're waiting for.
Hi, my name's Umberine. I do a lot of organizing through Doctors for America, as well as for my faith community, Islamic Medical Association of North America. And I think that for me, I didn't wake up one November morning and all of a sudden my world had changed. For the last year, people have been protesting where my dad goes to pray, and I've worried about his safety. So I just sorry. But essentially, I'm just we are surrounded by good people who are clueless. And I just feel heartbroken. Because I'm also the daughter of immigrants. But we have been through a lot also. My grandparents lived through partition in India. And, I have relatives who fled from Bangladesh because we were from northern India. Some people went to Bangladesh. And it's just we have been moving from country to country, generation to generation. And when people say, go back home, where is home? And so the thing is, how is it that these people who have been around me, who are progressive, who care, were so clueless while I was so worried for a year, and all of a sudden people are oh my God, what happened to my country? This has been there all along. And so how do we allow this to happen?
Wow, let's give a huge clap support to our sister. So I actually want to end with that, because I think that there is a kernel of really strange, warped hope in the "this has been there all along" message. And I too was in a pile on the floor for 4 months or something after the election. When I'm in a pile on the floor, things it's not good. This has been there all along. And those of us who are part of September 11th, who are Muslims or Arabs or people of color, who have been in this country and have felt these microaggressions or these macroaggressions and these systemic oppressions for years and years and years, we have felt this undercurrent for so long. And as our sister up front here said, it's hitting the rest of us. And so I refuse to be on record saying that there was silver lining to this election, because I really wish this didn't have to happen. I don't think for folks who are on the front lines that there's much silver lining. But I think that we are in a moment where people feel called, and that's why you all are here. That's why people are hanging out on a random Wednesday night live streaming. We are all called to serve. It requires all of us to take back these tools, to take back our democracy if we're really gonna sew things together. And things had to get really bad for us to realize that. So let's fix stuff. It's gonna be great. Here we go. Whew, all right. So, goals and agenda. I'm really happy to announce that I anticipated a lot of your concerns because a lot of your voices represent the American voices and the global voices that have similar concerns. So what we're gonna do today, it's here. What we're gonna do today is we're gonna, one of the things that, don't quote me on this because it could be an alternative fact, but I heard recently that during the 1960s, during the Vietnam War, we changed the title of social studies classes, or civics classes, to social studies, partially because people were uncomfortable with the curriculum, people as in people in power, were uncomfortable with the curriculum for high school students that kind of gave them the tools that they needed to understand how to sort of dismantle the master's house. And so we changed it from civics, which I actually think is a super important thing for high schoolers to learn at a formative time, to social studies. What I have found as a professional organizer, like a totally accidental professional organizer, is that there are not schools for organizers. I swear, I've looked everywhere. I've tried to invent them, I've tried to start them, it's a whole thing. There are not schools for organizers. Even here at Harvard, in my very humble organizer opinion, there's 1 or 2 professors who actually are woke and get their shit. The last presentation was lovely. It did not resonate with me as a professional activist. I think it's a really important conceptual framework. But for practitioners, there are 2, 3, 4 more steps we have to go, and there's nowhere that's talking about these conceptual frameworks and these actual tools. So I'm going to very humbly try to outline some of these things and give you the tools that people who are trained professional organizers try to give each other all the time, here and there. So we are, as I said, going to give you templates and tools to build your own. I'm a crafty dork. I don't do sports ball, but I do crafts. So DIY-mocracy is my little hat tip to all the sports analogies that most political professionals use all the time. We're going to give you the templates and tools to build your own DIY-mocracy, so you don't wait for some other person or some other time. And then we're going to actually commit together to next steps. So a couple disclaimers. One is that I am speaking on behalf of Sara EL-Amine, and I don't mean to talk about myself in the third person, but I'm speaking on behalf of myself and myself only, not Harvard Kennedy School, not President Obama or OFA, even though I worked for them for ages. I get to say way more fun things now that I don't. It's great. Yeah, you can tweet at me if you have questions, comments, and concerns. So we did welcome introductions. We're gonna dive right into electoral campaigns and some of the conceptual framework that I think schools miss. This is resistance school, so we get to dig right in. We're then gonna talk about issue advocacy campaigns. How many people here have worked on electoral campaigns before or volunteered before? So about half the room is raising their hand. How many people here have done issue advocacy before? Less. A third of the room is raising their hand. And if you're online, I'd love you to type if you've done issue advocacy or electoral advocacy and what type, and we'll get to you during the break as well. One of our big observations as professional activists is that very few people actually do both and toggle between. How many people have done both electoral and issue advocacy? Okay, decent representation, but it's probably a fifth of the room, I would say. And so we're gonna talk about why it's important that we all do both. And then we're going to actually dig into persuasion and give you some real concrete tools and tactics you can use to charm your families at the Thanksgiving table and to charm strangers when you knock on their doors, when you go knock on doors for the 2018 elections and issue advocacy next week, because we're going to get you there. It's going to be great. Don't look so scared. And then we'll do closing and next steps. So everyone feeling good? Am I speaking too quickly? Okay, this is a first. Great, really smart people here at Harvard. All right. So let's rock and roll. How many people have heard of the distinction between 2 terms, organizing versus mobilizing? Give a thumbs up if you have, thumbs sideways if you're not sure, thumbs down if you have no idea what I'm talking about. Everyone hates me, there's so many thumbs down. No, okay. So there's some medium sides. So one of the biggest things, now as a senior strategist and a senior advisor to a bunch of different epic grassroots movements, from MoveOn.org to Mobilization Lab to all these other cool things, what I've realized is even professional advocates don't actually know this differentiation. And it's a really important starting point for citizens and advocates together to have as we try to understand how to dismantle the master's house with its own tools, or how to like not even believe in the house, whatever you want to decide you're going to do. So we're going to talk about a little bit of both, and I'm going to see if there's like a little laser pointer thing that helps me do this. Maybe not. Okay, so, oh, yes. All right, mobilizing. How many people are on like, have been on like OFA listservs, email lists, or moveon.org listservs, or on like any type of like congressional candidate or gubernatorial candidate, and you can type in the box? Okay, cool. Great, like most people in the room here. And if you haven't, I'm really impressed with you. Good job, keep it up. So a lot of the type of organizing theory of change and the tactics, actually, how many, yeah, or like the Democratic or Republican Party too. A lot of the theory of change and organizing tactics that they use as these big national organizations are called mobilizing strategies. And what that basically means or assumes, and this isn't bad, I actually want to start off by like, there's no value judgment on both sides. We're just going to differentiate them. What that means is that the assumption of these organizations is that knowledge is at the top. That the power and the decision of what we should do in a given moment, like when there's a Muslim ban, what they say is like, sign this petition or call your member of Congress or do this thing. It's a mobilizing strategy. And all of us doing this one thing all together at once will create a ripple. And like it does, right? Like sometimes it totally, absolutely works. Having everyone do one thing all at once in a very sort of like linear way. How many people have felt, are on the DCCC or the RNCC listserv or congressional listservs and have felt really annoyed by the like sign this petition for the 45th time email? Okay, yes, I'm raising my hand too as a political professional who approved a lot of those emails. Yeah, it's actually really overused. And the thing I want to actually point to our friend whose parents were from the Ukraine. The thing that's really fascinating about this type of organizing strategy is that it's really actually helpful, like when you want to get everyone to do a thing all at the same time. But it's really unhelpful, and it can actually prohibit an actual revolution. Because what happens is everyone's so busy doing the thing and hand to phone and calling the member of Congress that they're not actually getting creative and using their own smarts and guts and minds and brains to figure out how to solve the problem that's right in front of their faces. So a part of my theory on the case for today's presentation is that progressive and conservative organizations alike, and I'm going to talk about conservative organizations in a hot minute, have been overusing mobilizing tactics, strategies, and organizational models in the past 5 years to the extent that we've actually inhibited people from actually grassroots organizing. So let's talk about what is organizing. What's an organizing model? How many people were part of the Women's March? Cool, okay. Or how many people, I'm trying to think of if there's like a conservative, well, you're probably not gonna raise your hands if you're in this room, but a conservative equivalent to this is like the anti-abortion, anti-choice movement. The anti-abortion, anti-choice movement is it's very disaggregated, it's very distributed. Same thing with the Women's March. It was like, it was well organized, but it was like, let's do this thing in many different places and let's see what arises from it organically, right? Are people following sort of the difference? Okay, so organizing strategies are a very different type of organizational structure and theory of change that organizations can take. And what's fascinating about this very moment that the Trump election has sort of caused both the right and the left to wake up to is that both Republicans and Democrats, conservatives and progressives, and socialists, have been overusing this mobilizing, particularly with the onset of online advocacy and email, overusing this mobilizing strategy, and they've been underutilizing the organizing strategy. And they haven't been giving people the tools to do these things on their own time. How many people feel like that resonates with you too? Like there's some more. Okay, this very session, Resistance School, it's an organizing strategy. It's really refreshing to see us give training to people and then say, go, do what you will with this strategy. So what we're trying to do is equip you with a well enough understanding or a comprehensive enough understanding of the difference between the two such that you can toggle as a local organizer in your own communities, even a humble local organizer. Like let's say you want to build stop signs at the end of your street. Really great organizing harnesses both types of tactics and builds in organizational structures that let you kind of switch between the two. So we're going to get into a little bit of what that looks like concretely. So I'll just spend like a hot minute on this slide because we're going to have you guys do a little bit of an exercise to wake you up again. But one of the things that's really fascinating, how many people here, again, and online, raise your hands if you have been part of a protest? Love protests, yes. Ah, so good. All right, raise your hand if you have been convinced by a protest. Empty room, one person. Okay, so here's the thing. I don't mean to be so like binary because actually protests are super effective tools, and we'll talk about why they're super effective tools. But one of the things that can be tough when we do too much mobilizing and not enough organizing as professional organizers, this is like my fault, my people's fault, totally take responsibility for this, is that average folks, real citizens of this country, non-average, excellent folks, can tend to use the tactics that are the most visible, not necessarily the tactics that are the most diverse or helpful. So the real place that we're trying to touch with our campaign plans that you guys are actually going to start to build tonight in real life is this beautiful little happy medium middle of the Venn diagram. And I'll point to it over here for our other people. We got to be bipartisan here. So tactics that both make us feel good. I mean, how many people felt inspired by the Women's March? Super inspired. Again, we already talked about how many people felt persuaded in the moment by it. How many people have been really interested to see that Steve Bannon is losing favor with Donald Trump? Really fascinating. There were some really amazing smart citizens and professional advocates who said, Donald Trump, we're going to power map him. He is a narcissist, classic, like let's talk to some psychologists. If we can frame the person who is closest or like, most dangerous to us as a threat to his narcissism and his sense of ego, that person will be deposed really quickly. And so that is a very different tactic and narrative that organizers push than protest necessarily. And then there's a whole different slate of tactics and narratives that move independent voters. So what we're going to really try to do is find the happy medium through some of this campaign planning that we're going to do live today between all of those different things. So anyone in the room have a sense of like what a tactic might be that's the happy medium? Like it might move Donald Trump, it might move independent voters, and it might be activists, like might excite our base. This is a really hard one. But like you're not professional, so it's okay. You can say anything. Yeah, right here in the corner, and we're gonna have our mic runner come. And guys on the computer, we're gonna get to you in just a hot minute. So type stuff in, because we'll acknowledge it.
My name is Noah Pastana from Indivisible Somerville. My thought would be probably some kind of large like volunteer event, something that has both a kind of a physical effect to like your community, and will make kind of more of a permanent structure. Something like just something I'm trying to organize, like a large scale cleanup day, things like that.
Yeah, like a community service event maybe that challenges the perception that progressives are just out there for themselves and only serving their own communities, and you wear, cool We're the Resistance t-shirts while you do the community service event. All right, anything else from this side? Other thoughts on stuff that it's really hard. It's like the Holy Grail. In the middle, yes. With the cool glasses, a mic runner's gonna run to you. Oh, there we go.
Thank you. Marcia Brown from Boston Indivisible Group. And we saw this happen last Thursday, where we hit the sweet spot where the media broadcast images of children being killed. And the images of the children being killed not only moved Donald Trump, but moved the base and moved the independent voters.
Yep.
And a very serious bunch of actions happened as a result of that.
Yep. So for better or for worse, not only are events on the ground that we can host really key parts of finding that sweet spot, the media narrative that we can create, all of us, and even when you think about like United, the United disaster. I flew United this morning. It was really stressful. And the United disaster, like the thing that is, I think, going to change this like horrendous airline policy, unrelated to the resistance, maybe it's sort of a part of the resistance, I feel like it's a part of the resistance, it was actually something that like communicated and talked to all of us. Like seeing a fellow citizen dragged through with a camera, like that is going to have much more of an impact. So images, things that we create ourselves, can really easily be that sweet spot. And there's things that we can do as average citizens to elevate those voices and those narratives all the time. All right, so I want to talk about organizational models of leadership because I think this is a really important premise as we're still like soundly in the electoral, trying to understand the electoral framework. Because as I sort of keep saying time and time again, we can win these issue battles all we want and pass really great policy, but unless we have elected officials in office who pass and vote for that great policy, then ACA will get repealed again for the 70th time, but not really because they couldn't pull their stuff together. So issue advocacy and electoral advocacy are intrinsically tied. So I want to ask folks. This is a leadership model. I think Marshall Gans might actually talk about this as well, where there's one person in the center and there's many different people coming to that one person. Can anyone tell me what might be wrong with that leadership model? It's what's in the White House right now. Wow. Super sage observation. Literally, exactly. Okay, what else? Over here, anyone? Yeah, what's that? Yeah, passivity, totally. It's like, it's everyone around is coming to this one person. One person in the middle can't solve everything. Like actually, functionally, logistically, it doesn't work. And too often, because of these digital tools that we've built and we overuse as resistance organizers, we build systems and infrastructure where there's one person in the middle who has all the power and the skills and knowledge, and everybody coming at them. How many people have worked in an organization or company or team where that has happened? Yes. It's like when like you watch 5-year-olds play soccer, and they're all like, I want the ball, let's go to the ball. Like that, I think that's happening in the White House right now. It's really interesting. Okay. So then there's the second model of leadership where there's many different people going in different directions. What is wrong with this model of leadership? Yes, right here. There's no central organ. So like that kind of looks like the White House too, maybe a little bit, like the different, yeah. So like what's bad about that? Yeah, there's no one bringing it all together. There's no one saying, here's our vision. We're all walking in lockstep. Here's our serious strategy in general. Like this is how we're going to fix this. It's just like, let's do the thing. I'm the person in the middle. And everyone else is going to do their own things. Okay, bad leadership models. Number 1, number 2, bad leadership models. I'll go over here too to be equal. Okay, so the third model of leadership here that we're going to talk about in an electoral framework, as you guys really think about, I'm going to try to get you in this electoral framework because winning in 2018, winning in 2020, whoever you are, has to be the ultimate goal, but we're going to use issue advocacy to work backwards from it. What does this leadership model look like? And what is good or bad about this leadership model? Let's hear from someone you haven't heard from before. Right here, yes.
I see tight groups.
He sees tight groups. What do you mean?
I mean that there's groups that are working together, but then the groups themselves are also connected and sharing information in that way.
Exactly. So different people who have different maybe roles or functions within a team can all work together, but there is, what is this? A centralized leader, right, who is leading the way. So there's a lot of folks here. How many folks here are part of Indivisible or your own community advocacy groups? Any folks here ever been a part of OFA or any of the Obama campaigns? So a key tenet as we talk about the successes and failures of electoral advocacy campaigns is that strong teams and distributed leadership are absolutely crucial to your success as you're building out these electoral strategies. And we'll talk about exactly how to build them. But you guys know this in the human landscape of things. This is just how the PTA works better. It's how your family at I keep talking about Thanksgiving because there's a lot of angst. Hi, family back there. We don't have angsty Thanksgivings. It's great. Yeah, the team model is great. So we're going to talk a little bit more about the team model in both contexts. But a big premise of today's presentation, electoral organizing, is that we have to understand how electoral and issue advocacy relate to each other, and then we have to acknowledge that building teams of people locally is actually how we're gonna get stuff done and win in 2018 and again in 2020. So the second thing that I just want to pull out before we get into some of the timeline nuts and bolts around electoral advocacy and the definitions of it, it's really warm in here, is the difference between issue advocacy and electoral advocacy. So how many people are like at home or here today that want to win the 2018 elections? That's one of your reasons that you came today. Anyone raise your hands? Okay, I'm gonna hold my imaginary mic over to my friend here in the corner. What are you doing now? What do you wanna do now to win the 2018, and we're gonna have a real mic come, to win the 2018 elections, like in your community? What does that look like?
Not enough, apparently. When you start on local elections, there are elections going on in Cambridge, in Boston, in Massachusetts, in Georgia, in Kansas, in Montana.
And you're like, how the heck do I keep track of all of them? Our friend over here was saying that.
Right.
Okay.
We get way too many emails that tell us to do way too many things.
Yeah.
So how do we start organizing on the local level to have people running for office? And I like this idea of trying to think about how to talk to people using issues.
Yeah.
For people like me, I hear primarily because I just can't talk to Trump people.
What happens when you try?
I'm too angry.
Okay.
Way too angry. So the idea of how we use issues to cut through the gap.
Yeah.
And to begin to connect on things we all care about.
Yeah.
Rather than refighting the last war.
Yes.
That would be a good thing.
Yes. Okay, gorgeous. So one of the things that I've been randomly doing as an organizer is I've gotten these calls from clubs, Democratic clubs, progressive clubs all across the country who are like, I want to win the 2018 elections now. Tell me what I do. And I'm like, great, I will come do an issue advocacy training for you. And they're like, no! I want to win the 2018 elections now. You need to train me on how to win. And I'm like, I will come do an issue advocacy. No. And so one thing that I'm just gonna keep repeating until it gets super annoying is that winning the 2018 elections or the 2020 elections now means being really smart issue advocates in the moment. It means talking about how ACHA and ACA is the Democratic, that's like the Obamacare that actually exists. ACHA is the new, frankly, from my perspective, nonpartisan, silly, horrible replacement for the ACA, right? It's talking about the personal impacts of that now to persuadable voters in the middle who make up this huge swath of people in our country who might have voted for Trump or might have not voted at all, right? But are crucial parts of this coalition we need to weave together to win in 2018 and 2020. So I want to let you guys in on a super intense, dirty secret. It's about money and politics. Okay, ready? So imagine that you own a restaurant. And you are this happy restaurant owner, and maybe you're Italian and you live in Italy and you make the food with your family, and then your son and your daughter serve the food, and your partner, if you have a really great partner, does the cleaning, which is really helpful. And all of a sudden, there's this really intense set of restrictive laws that's passed. And the new laws in Italy, poor Italians, say that as a restaurant, you may only cook the food, serve the food, or clean up after the food. You may not do all three at once. What do you do? And, there's one other part of the law that they forgot to include. The people who cook the food, serve the food, and clean up after the food can't talk to each other. This is how restrictive and strange campaign finance laws are in our country. Genuinely, as someone who has worked on every side of the partition in campaign finance, as an organizer, I could either, as a part of an official entity, as a part of a 501c4 nonprofit or a 501c3 nonprofit or a PAC, and these rules were designed to help us, genuinely. I could only, when I was organizing on Obamacare, I ran Arizona to help pass the Affordable Care Act. Crazy state to run. In 2009, John McCain had only won it by 9 points. Huge unregistration rates, massive Latino population, Latinx population. I was super excited to work there. And we had 3 blue dog Democrats in 2009 and 2010, blue dog congressional seats that we were gonna persuade on healthcare. Because I was officially a part of the Democratic National Committee, I couldn't work with SEIU or the healthcare unions that were doing organizing legally. I could not work with the people who were doing organizing of healthcare workers to pass the Affordable Care Act. So In some instances, these campaign finance rules are actually really helpful, and these philanthropic divisions are really helpful. In other instances, they mean that you as citizens have literally 300 times more power than I do as a professional. Because when I was working for a 501c3 organization that can just do education and can't do advocacy because of our tax status with the IRS, I couldn't go and lobby a member of Congress or lead my local citizens in lobbying a member of Congress to pass healthcare reform. It's really restrictive. And so to your point, back to your point at the end of the day, you guys are the only ones online, here in the room, who can do this stuff. The institutions are broken. We don't know better than you do. You know better than we do. And you're doing it better than we are at Indivisible, at all these grassroots groups, in all these efforts, unfortunately, than our broken system has again and again. So 2017 issue advocacy and laying the foundation for the midterms will lead us to successful 2018 midterm election and laying foundation for issue rights, which will lead us to, again, this whole crazy cycle that just repeats itself. So I want to stop and just get to the last slide here, and then we're going to pause for questions on electoral advocacy specifically, because I've raised a bunch of really strange things that hopefully have confused you, because it's sort of a confusing thing. But did anyone here ever run, or anyone online ever run for office in like high school or in middle school or in college? Okay, we're going to work on our buddy right here. Hello, what is your name?
My name is Nathan.
Nathan. And Nathan, what did you run for?
I was the student body president of both my high school and my college.
Oh, wow, Nathan. Oh, okay. So Nathan, I have a question for you. When you first decided to run for student body president of your high school, before you were like the big college fancy president, what would you have said, like, if I was like to go hang out with 16-year-old Nathan, and I'd be like, Nathan, what's your special, who is your voter base? Like, who would you say your voter base was as little 16-year-old? And be honest, don't be like, it was the jocks. It was really great. I mean, it might have been the jocks.
I mean, I did the morning announcements, so it was really the nerds.
Okay, good. You're in good company. This is great. All right, perfect. So it was the nerds. And if you had to say, like, who is your persuasion universe of people that, like, maybe, like, could have swung your way, but, like, might have taken some conversations and some personal charm and some glad handing and some, you know, like, I don't know, locker stickers. Who would those people be?
I think it was people who felt left out by what was already happening in the school.
Whoa, say more about that.
That we had a school that had strong clubs that were sort of institutionalized, but we didn't have clubs for sort of diversity. It's hard to start new things.
Yeah.
And we wanted to sort of open up the school so there could be more people running more clubs.
Wow, you were a really insightful 16-year-old. So your middle persuadable universe was like the disenfranchised young leaders of the high school. Okay, and who were like the people that like in actual campaigning we call them fives, because you rate people 1 through 5 when you talk to them on the phone. They're like the people that you will never persuade, even if you paid them money, which is illegal. You would just never persuade them, and you wouldn't even waste your time talking to them. Who were those people in your high school election?
Oh gosh, I wouldn't really even know.
No one hated you?
I mean, I'm sure lots of people hated
me,
but they thankfully didn't come up.
We
and
had really
tell me.
different high school experiences. Okay, yeah, but there weren't people that you were like, this type of person probably is not my buddy.
I wasn't a jock. I wasn't the partier, so I probably
maybe the
wasn't
partiers.
Gonna get
okay.
their votes.
Okay, was there a partier president here? I really want to know. Yeah, girl. Okay, cool. So we're gonna hang out afterwards. But okay, fantastic. So your simple exercise here is gonna help illustrate something that political professionals got wildly wrong in the 2016 elections. Mark my words, quote me on this, write this down, whole thing. And you can hand the mic back, because thank you. Round of applause for our student body president. So there's really 1, 2, 3, 4 basic, we're like ending this electoral 101, 201 presentation with this little screenshot here. There are 4 phases of electoral advocacy, no matter what your campaign is. Whether you're running for student body president in high school, in college, whether you're running for American president, whatever your campaign is, there are 4 phases. Number 1, you have to get a sense, ID the voters, get a sense of who stands where, why, what do they care about. Beautiful that you knew, even this very few years past your high school days, exactly what the persuadable voters still cared about way back in high school, right? So IDing voters as campaigns. The Hillary Clinton campaign did this. The Trump campaign kind of did this with like Twitter. It was sort of a thing. They didn't really have a field effort. The Obama campaign, when I worked in the Obama campaign in both cycles, in every primary, in every general election, we spent hundreds of thousands of volunteer and staff hours IDing voters to understand where people stood and how we could build our campaign to reflect their needs. Now, I want to point something really important out. We didn't spend that time understanding where they stood so we could pander to them. Some people do. Some people. We spent our time understanding where those people stood because it was a key part of understanding how to govern them. And as someone who studied peace building and democracy building and developing countries and war and conflict, elections are more than just about winning. They're about getting people to talk to each other and getting elected officials to understand their base enough such that they can govern. Okay, so we're gonna get back to why we totally messed this up in a second. Then you figure out who is not registered. I'm sure this wasn't an issue with high school elections. It's a huge issue here. In some states, as some of you may know, you have to give your social security number to a stranger if you want to register to vote on the street. We have different laws state by state for how to register to vote, but it's super important that people like you are part of being on street corners all over, helping people understand that it's their right and their privilege. But then after you've ID'd voters, you register voters. Next, the penultimate thing you do is you persuade voters. So you have a sense in your brains. I need to get to 50% plus 1 to win my high school or to win my congressional district. How many people paid attention to the race that happened last night? Where we lost. It was actually a huge victory and really exciting because it was a 27-point divide, and we only lost by a little bit. But so ID voters, register voters, persuade voters. Persuasion for me is the #1 peace-building thing that when I think back to my dad's Civil War experience is crucially important as a democracy-building exercise. So does anyone know how much we spend on average when we run a presidential election in the US these days, in the past couple races, on both sides? It's around $1.2 billion every 2.5 years on an American presidential race, on each side. And Donald Trump didn't spend this because he used Twitter a lot more than he used community organizing tactics that cost money. But $1.2 billion investment? Oh my gosh. So you better be engaging the populace and having them talk to each other and convince each other if you're going to win. And then finally, you turn out voters. How many people have gotten phone calls from people trying to get you to know where or when to vote? Yeah, most people in the room. Okay. So throughout, if you're a smart organization or entity, as all of you will be when you leave this room, you're using these tactics and these tools to build your teams and your entities and your smart organizations of some people who can do digital stuff, some people can do data stuff, people who can help you with your message, people who could help you, print out your maps to knock on doors. Neither the Hillary Clinton campaign nor the Donald Trump campaign, for the first time in modern American presidential history, ran persuasion programs on the ground in the states. Absolute malpractice. Absolute malpractice. And I say this as someone who has many dear, deep, beloved friends who ran the Hillary Clinton campaign that I'm super angry about to this day. And people who I know who ran battleground states for the Clinton campaign are angry about this to this day. And so one of the key messages, and it's not surprising that the Trump campaign didn't run a persuasion program because he was busy tweeting bombastically and using that as persuasion. But if you get anything out of today's presentation at all, I hope that you get that persuasion is not only a thing that we need to do to win. We can't be so arrogant as to think that if we just turn out, we have enough Democratic voters, we have enough progressive voters, if we just turn them out, we'll win. We have to, as part of democracy building in our country, we have to engage with people that we disagree with. And it's really uncomfortable, it's really awkward, it's really weird. It starts now, it starts with issue advocacy, and then it goes into electoral advocacy, and it is so unsexy and unglamorous and stressful, but it's really important, and all of you are the experts on it. And you're more the experts, unfortunately, than many of us who are professionals to this day. So I want to just take a quick pause, because we just spent a lot of time talking about electoral advocacy, and I just talked very excitedly at you for many minutes. And I want to give folks just a moment. And I'm actually going to go to this next slide here. And I want you to think about the summer of 2018. And I want you to look in your brain, just imagine your calendar. Where are you going to be in the summer? If you're students here, what are you doing in the summer of 2018? Why are you doing that? What are you fighting on? What races, if you don't know, that's okay too. What is happening to you in the summer of 2018? And I'm going to leave this voter contact grid up here while we talk about this. And if you're on the computer, I want you to type in what you're doing in the summer of 2018 as well. And I want folks to jot down for yourselves, what are you thinking of doing? What has stirred inside you that's going to change what you're doing in the summer of 2018 now? So we're going to give you two minutes to reflect on that, and then we're going to come back and have some quick sharing. And maybe you're like, man, I'm going to hang out on my couch and drink some lemonade and yell at MSNBC. That's going to feel really good. But write that down for yourself and feel the shame, too. So we're going to give you 2 minutes, and then we'll come back. And I'm going to check in with folks online, too. Oh yeah, we're doing it live. All right, we're gonna have our fantastic Twitter buddy. What is your name? Brenna. Thank you. Let's give a round of applause for Brenna. She's been like hanging out with the tweeters. Thank you, Twitter people. I don't know where you are. Up there. Hello. Thank you for your patience. We're really excited to read some of your comments and thoughts. So we're gonna have you. Is there a microphone? I was like, we can have you talk, but that's a little awkward. So.
Wanted to read 2 amazing comments from Twitter. First one says, 100% of the women in our Resistance School watch party were student body presidents at high school. So I thought that was really great.
So do we know what I want to know what you guys are doing in the summer of 2018. That's the next question because I'm really terrified and excited. It's going to be great. Okay, what else?
And this one says, issues are getting my mom to call her representatives for the first time in her 70 years. She always voted, but it's more now.
Oh my gosh, I love it. Rock and roll. Okay, thank you. Any fun things people are saying they're going to do on Twitter or live stream this upcoming summer? Did you see?
A lot of people are already planning their next organizing meetings. I was seeing on Twitter, people are saying, tomorrow I'm getting my group together and we're going to start thinking about 2018.
Okay, rock and roll. Woo! Okay, thank you so much for your comments and your tracking. Let's hear from a couple quick folks in the room here. Any thoughts after this presentation? I mean, and we're going to get into issue advocacy briefly and then persuasion, which is the really sexy part. What you're going to do in the summer of 2018 has changed or adjusted. Or maybe it's the same and you're like just more leaned in. All the way in the back, yeah. Our awesome mic runner is going to come to you. Hello.
Well, it's not fair because I came up with this idea last week, so I don't know if it counts. I want to recruit volunteers, and they'll actually pay for this, who are in blue states like Massachusetts.
Yeah.
And bring them for a week or 2 weeks in the summer of 2018 to work directly on campaigns in purple states or red states. And it's not only going to help the campaigns, but it will be kind of like a cultural exchange, because there are people who are so frustrated here. They feel like they're isolated. They don't really know what they can do. And they'll be sleeping at people's homes and eating together and just learning about like what it's like to communicate and, you know, in purple states and red states where you're not in this bubble like we're in here.
Gosh, okay, I'm gonna leave the mic with you for a second because I have 2 follow-up questions. What if we were actually doing a foreign exchange and we were going to a different country? Because we have pretty polarized politics and cultures, even in the States in this country. What would be the actual helpful thing for them to do on the ground if they were to get to know or understand someone of a different culture or background or perspective?
Well, you know, I could steal a page from Knock Every Door.
Yeah.
But I just think that actually staying at someone's house, and what I'd actually like to see is actually be in contact with people who share, you know, our values, but who are just much better at communicating with people and creating that bridge. I think people could learn more from people who are like them but who have adapted to living in purple states or red states than actually confronting, you know, Trump supporters.
What is your instinct when you come across someone that's different from you or that disagrees with you?
Yeah, I mean, I'm one of these people that likes to live in a bubble, because when I get out of my bubble, I feel like I can't breathe. So.
All right, that's perfect. That's amazing. I want to hear from one other person that I'm going to actually pull that beautiful comment and thought full circle into our next. Anyone else have anything else? So, yeah, right here.
Well, I spent some time in New Hampshire last year, but I really like your idea about going as a group to a state. But when you were asking about something further, I was thinking about partnering with people in those states. And really, I think the partnership would be stronger and more interesting than just having the Massachusetts guys kind of hang around and trying to do something.
So you need to get to 50%. I'm going to keep the mic with you. You need to get to 50% plus 1 in a given state. Let's say Colorado, for example. And let's imagine, this is a little true, but Colorado has 1/3 Democratic voters, 1/3 independent voters, and 1/3 conservative or Republican voters. Bear with me because I'm going to guide you through something you already know, but what percentage of people, let's say, on different sides do you need to turn out and swing to support your people broadly so that you get to 50% plus 1? Probably like most of the progressive people, and then what? In the middle folks? Like half the middle folks, more or less? Okay, cool. So what I love about this idea of the cultural exchange is that it sounds like it's engaging people who are on this side, who are like maybe like in your same corner as a progressive, or if you're listening live stream and you happen to be a conservative, we need more organizing there too because no one's listening to each other. What is it that you could do to take some of that capacity on the progressive side and slice off the crucial middle voters so that we actually get a good percentage of those middle voters to vote for us? What's your gut? And it can be totally wrong.
Well, you've been talking a lot about issue advocacy. I'm guessing that might be magic.
Who else has an idea on what up here?
You got to tell people what's in it for them.
Okay.
Every time you talk to somebody who doesn't agree with you, the value proposition has to be, I'll give you my vote if what you're offering me is going to cost me less than if I don't have it. So if you go to another place and you're going to be doing a cultural exchange, your first objective has got to be, how can I let these people understand, help them understand that what we're offering is better for them than any other option that is available.
I love that. And I'm going to oversimplify your comment for a second, so bear with me. But how many people here have ever had their mother tell something to them? And how many people here, keep your hand raised, have ever listened to what their mother told them? Okay, cool. I know you know this, but I'm using your point as just an illustrative example because I think this is part of what's really tough for all of us. And one of the pre-readings that I outlined really sort of started to elaborate on this a little bit. Our instinct, when we think about 2018, when we think about issue advocacy, when we think about what we can do to change the world, is to say, if I just could talk to these people and talk some sense into them, then I could change the world and we could win the election. How many people, like, honestly, I'm one of them. How many people, like, sort of genuinely, that's your gut? Okay, great. Really, what the numbers and the math say, and I'm going to flip ahead here, what the numbers and the math say is that and the psychological behavioral studies too, it's listening, not talking, and that's the hardest thing to do because in our crocodile brain, our lizard brain, goes, when we go into a place of conflict, goes right into how can I convince someone using my words. I know you guys aren't saying this, so I'm a little bit putting words in your mouth, but this is like a thing that we do. How can I convince the person using my words? Not how can I understand them better and identify our shared values, even though, and you were sort of starting to say this, right? Like, there are people in these states who have shared values as us, but might articulate them differently. But my theory in the case, and part of what actually numerically went wrong in the Clinton election, for example, is that we relied on trying to turn out people who agreed with us instead of actually meaningfully listening to people in the middle who maybe would have agreed with us if we had listened more, not if we had talked differently. And so too many progressives, particularly with Facebook and email and that whole mobilizing strategy, myself 1,000% included, try to talk better instead of listen more wholeheartedly. So the last couple of things I want to get into before we actually give you some really easy and quick tools you can use to defeat your lizard brain when you're trying to do issue advocacy and electoral advocacy in the next few years, is a little bit about who we want to talk to turn them out to vote. So you can see on this slide, I don't know if you can see it because it's a little bit far away, but this is a grid of all the types of people that exist in this fictional state, whether it's Colorado or wherever we want to send people to win the 2018 election. All the different types of people who might be for or against our candidate, and then likely or unlikely to support. Who do folks think we want to talk to during the persuasion sort of like phase in a campaign? Who do we want to find and talk to shoulders down with a smile during the persuasion phase of a campaign? Any thoughts? We're going to hear from our friend in the lovely yellow. You think that who we want to talk to during the persuasion phase is the people who are undecided, and how likely are they to vote or not vote? Are they very likely, maybe likely, or unlikely to vote?
I think people that are likely to vote but are undecided seem to me like they'd be a good place to go.
Why?
For people. Because they have the habit of voting, but right now they're not for the person that you're for or the issue that you're for. So my hope would be that if you listened to them and reflected and found shared values, that then when it came time to vote, that they would be more affected by the message that you've given. That would be my hope.
Gorgeous. And why do you care about efficiency, though?
Did I say efficiency?
Well, you talked about like the people that are the sort of like, I heard you say the people that are the most worthwhile to talk to are the people who are very likely to vote, but undecided. Why very likely, why not unlikely to vote? Couldn't you persuade them to vote and persuade them to vote for your candidate?
You're trying to
I heard a laugh.
to make two changes there. You're trying to both develop the habit of voting, which is hard to do. And once people do have that habit, they tend not to lose it most times.
Yes.
But if you're trying to change the habit of voting and the direction in which to vote, that seems harder to me.
So our buddy over here, was it Nathan? Our buddy Nathan over here, he's not going to talk to the folks who are like not going to vote in the high school or college election. He's going to talk to the folks that are likely to vote but have issues that feel underrepresented, and he's going to listen to them and probably spend his limited time is his most precious resource, on that instead of on talking to the folks who like are smoking joints in the bathroom and don't vote. That never happens in American high schools, it's fine. Okay, fantastic. And so so that's like early on in the campaign, that's maybe the summer. Then you get to like the fall, and you're gearing up for get out the vote, and you're ready to rock and roll. Who do you want to talk to? Who's your target of folks to really turn out and vote when it actually comes time for get out the vote? Any thoughts? Let's go to right here in the green.
I guess as you're getting down to the deadline itself, you want to be talking to your core supporters in the 4 column, but those who are unlikely or maybe to vote, because you want to make sure they actually get out.
In the 4 column of candidate support, but are unlikely to vote?
Yeah, unlikely. Well, unlikely or maybe, because at that point, you can be pretty sure that the people who are very likely to vote in for you are going to turn out, and assuming you only have so many volunteers to go out and so many resources, you want to focus on, maybe the maybes or the unlikely, but you want to make sure that they're reminded or actually get to the poll.
Yeah, gorgeous. Okay, almost. So I would say you probably want to, same point here, you almost got there at the end. You want to focus on the people at the very end when you're trying to win the election who are for your candidate and maybe likely to vote, because it's less distance to move them. But when you're in the middle of the summer heading into your election or into your issue campaign, you want to focus on the people who are undecided but probably pretty likely to vote here. So what happens, I'm going back to Thanksgiving, what happens at many people's Thanksgiving tables? Who do you guys normally spend your time fighting with? Yeah, there's laughter. You spend your time fighting with like these guys or like really against your candidate but super likely to vote. One of the core problems of issue advocacy campaigns and electoral campaigns and the way humans work in the world is that it's a lot easier to spend time as individuals like fighting with these people who we're never going to change the minds of than it is to find and encounter, and this was to your point about how you want to spend next summer, to find and encounter the people who are actually movable heading into the election. So we're actually going to dig into some persuasion tactics, and then there's a worksheet. I don't think people here have it, but it is linked in the page. We'll send this out to everyone after here, the session 2 for the Resistance School page that actually gives you the questions and tools you need in your own congressional district to ask the questions about what is your voter registration makeup in your own district? How many people know what your voter registration makeup is in your own district? I have no idea. And I'm a political professional. I know it for other people's districts, but I don't know it for mine. So I'm going to actually bop ahead here to where you fit an example. I did a training a few weeks ago in Orange County, which the New York Times called the tip of the spear for the midterms. And one of the things they asked me to do, again, in this training in Orange County was like, how do we win the 2018 elections now? And I was like, issue advocacy. And they were like, no, how do we win? And I was like, okay, let's actually take a moment. The real way that we get aside from the siloed bubble talk, where we all stay in places that are comfortable to us, and like I do it too, I live in San Francisco, my goodness, is we know who lives in our district, and then we work to try to find the people who are actually in the middle and engage in real conversations with them. Now, typically, a campaign or candidate should be building this type of infrastructure. So they're helping give you the lists and tools that you need heading into an electoral issue advocacy campaign so that you can do that type of work to move persuadable voters. It's my theory on the case that we as individuals and as citizens need to have a much better hold of who actually demographically and from a registration perspective lives in our districts so that we can actually question some of these political professionals as they make what are sometimes good calls for winning but bad calls for democracy. And good calls for winning but bad calls for democracy are, we could win if all the Democrats turn out in this district, so we're not going to run any type of persuasion program. Why is that problematic from a big D democracy standpoint? Because then how are you going to govern? You haven't talked to anyone you disagreed with as a part of building the campaign. It's not authentic governing. And we're doing this too often in these siloed mobilizing campaigns. So I'm actually going to have folks, this is the last little exercise before we close out with a real persuasion tactic. I'm going to have folks, I don't know how we're going to do this here in this room, but why don't you in this room turn to a neighbor and brainstorm some of the places you could look to find, you can turn to 2 or 3 neighbors, where are some of the places you could look to find the registration makeup of your district? This is like the dorkiest question you've ever been asked to talk to a stranger speed dating style about. If you're online, I'm going to have you actually Google or talk to neighbors the same thing, and we're going to take 2 minutes. Where do you look? We're going to come back together. I'm using the power of my little weird mics here. So these are things we need to know as well as we know our middle names, because we're all committing to be like huge political Dorcases by attending this session. So what were some of the ways that you thought how to find this information? No one in the room of smart people. Yeah, right over here in the corner. With the on-message crimson. Yeah?
At the very worst, we could call our rep's office and ask if they have the information.
Why is that the worst? That's amazing. I love it. Yeah, that's amazing. You can call your representatives' offices, and you can actually ask them these things, and they have to know, they should know the answers because they represent the district. Amazing. What else? Anyone else? How about you guys?
Oh, I had that idea.
You had that idea. What was your idea? Same?
Same.
Yep, back here. Good idea. Everyone has it.
So go to City Hall and go to the voting person and
Yes.
ask for it.
Yes, amen. Okay, secretaries of state. Anyone know what they do? I barely do. They do this. They do exactly this. You could call your secretary of state. You could say, hey, I just Googled this, and apparently Duxbury is in this congressional district, and I just really want to know the breakdown of my congressional district. To your point earlier, like it is on us to figure out who stands with us, who doesn't. You can actually, all of this data is public data. In most states, your voter registration data, whether you register as a Democrat or a Republican or an independent, and even if you turned out in the last election, is publicly released data. And there was a really interesting study that a group called the Analyst Institute did that I advise you never to repeat, but I love this so much, where they sent this test letter. They wanted a test to see if they could increase turnout of people in midterm elections. And so they sent a test letter to everybody's neighbors in a given neighborhood. And they said, here is a list of all the people who voted in the midterms in your neighborhood last year. You were not on this list, and this list is public information. So please vote so that you are on this list again next election. Guess how much turnout increased? A lot. Guess how many really pissed off calls they got? A lot. So we don't use those tactics anymore, but all of this information is actually public. So the last thing I want to say, and I'm going to actually really bop through this because I already ran through a bunch of the really tough stuff. Elections are in some ways the easiest thing that we do in our democracy, because how do you win an election? 50% plus one, right? Like you look at the numbers in your own district, which none of us know and all of us should, frankly. And then you figure out, okay, where do people stand? This is what these electoral brainiacs, I'm not a brainiac, and I should not, you guys are just as qualified to do this stuff as I am, and that's my whole point of today. All we do is we sit down and we say, what are the numbers of the district? What are the issues people care about? How do we find out who cares about what issues and is our gut right? And then how do we have conversations and listen and talk? Probably more listening than talking, but we're all really bad at that because we care. In equal measure so that we build that coalition and win. Guess what? Issue advocacy, same exact formula. So after an election, and this is going to take 3 minutes, and then we're going to do the sexy persuasion thing because it's that easy. After an election in the world, we're going to go back because there's some fun animation here. All the issue and electoral advocacy groups are like, yay, we won, we did this, we won the election. Or oh my God, I'm a pal on the floor and I'm crying and I'm eating all the Ben & Jerry's ice cream because they're so progressive. Right? So that's electoral and issue advocacy groups. Then the government is oh my God, let's see if the animation works. No, that doesn't work. But the government turns over, so that's a whole thing. So you guys saw the Trump campaign or the Trump administration can't figure out how to run the Easter egg roll because they just switched all their staff and they don't know how to do it. So the government's in disarray. The issue advocacy groups are either sobbing on the floor or they're celebrating, but they're not really doing work in strategic, smart-centered ways. Voters are oh, I'm really happy. Oh, I'm really sad. Oh, I have no idea what happened. Elected officials are turned about because there's turnover, so some of them vacate their offices and go on vacation like Barack Obama and look really tan and happy while the rest of us sob. And then Trump decorates the White House and it's a whole thing. Some of these guys get more money and resources, right? Because all of a sudden, people in the world realize, oh my God, if we want to lay the foundation and the runway for winning in 2018 or 2020, all we can do is talk about the issues. There are some local elections, but we kind of are on standstill. We got to persuade people and build that 50% plus one coalition now. The government turns over. There's the pretty little thing I was waiting for. And then volunteers don't always know what to do. So a bill becomes a law in super crazy, complicated ways that I will not get into because you guys can all Google or watch Schoolhouse Rock, which is actually my professional opinion of the best place to understand how a bill becomes a law. But the really sexy, exciting thing about issue advocacy is that it's literally copy-paste the same tactics and tools as electoral advocacy. So I talked about IDing people, persuading people, turning them out to vote. Guess what? When you want to stop the ACHA healthcare reform bill and stop the repeal of Obamacare, you do exactly the same things around IDing elected officials, understanding where they stand, trying to persuade them through listening more than talking, using press and media narrative and all the brilliant things that you guys are doing as grassroots advocacy groups towards elected officials that you did towards individuals at their doorsteps. It is the exact same slate of tools and tactics and metrics that you use. You build organization throughout, and then it results sometimes in really successful campaigns. So at the end of the day, what is the core tactic that ties together issue advocacy and electoral advocacy? You guys know what the answer is because I've been blabbing about it and saying it for ages. It's persuasion. If you don't understand, and we've been weaving this throughout the presentation, how to persuade people that disagree with you, whether they're an elected official that wants to vote to, well, we're not voting to bomb Syria because we didn't actually bring it to Congress. So let's think about something different. That wants to, whether it's an elected official that wants to promote vouchers for public schools, and you're trying to fight for or against that, or whether it's an elected official who wants to peel back climate reforms that President Obama passed. Persuading elected officials as issue advocates now, persuading citizens who are going to be voters in 2018 is core to what you need to do. So let's get into the sexy, we already sort of talked about this, last bit here around persuasion. So I'm gonna ask you guys to do a 2-minute breakout where you're gonna, you found someone next to you before, you're gonna go to someone behind you or in front of you now, and you're going to pick a random topic, and same if you're online, if you're alone, you can persuade yourself, it's gonna be really awkward. Just hang out, think about a topic that would be really hard to persuade you on. You're gonna find someone behind you or in front of you, and you're going to pick a random topic to persuade them on. It can be that this pencil is better than that pencil. It can be that your daughter should be able to read dystopian fiction, even though she's 12 and you think that's a bad idea. You can pick whatever persuasion topic you want. You have 2 minutes, which is actually scientifically the amount of time that you generally have, if not less, to persuade somebody. And you're gonna decide within that 2 minutes also, this is like real world persuasion here. It's this hard, but you guys are gonna get really good at it. You're gonna also decide who is the persuader and who is the persuaded. So let's say you two decide to pair with each other, and two random folks who are sitting in a living room together watching in Idaho Falls decide to pair with each other, say, I call persuader, I call persuaded. I'm gonna persuade you that my glasses are blue, even though they're pink, and then you go. And so I'm gonna give you guys 2 minutes on my imaginary watch, which is actually here, and ready, set, go. back together. That is the average time that you have to hold a persuadable voter's attention on a given topic after introducing yourself. It's like really tough, right? It's the whole thing. Who had someone that did a really good job of persuading you on something really random inside of the room? And we're going to go to our friends on Twitter in a hot minute, too. Anyone have a good persuasion conversation? See, you're not trained on this. Our campaigns spend $1.2 billion every 2.5 years, and don't do this. I'm going to hear from folks we haven't heard from yet. Yeah, right here. Okay, who did you talk to? All right, we're going to have you guys come up front. Sorry. Here we go. Yep, this is Organizer School. Organizer School is not a lecture because adult learning theory says that adults do not learn via lectures. So we're going to have you guys mimic your 2-minute, just do it, actually. Have your 2-minute persuasion conversation, and we're going to critique this as if we're critiquing people at doors in red states that we're engaging with. So, or as if we're critiquing conversations with elected officials trying to persuade them. All right, so who is the persuader, who's the organizer, and who's the persuadable voter or elected? You're the persuadable, and you're the organizer?
I am.
All right, and Meredith has some experience being an organizer, so this is gonna be really fun. All right, so ready? What was the weird random topic you decided to do persuasion on?
So I was trying to persuade my unfortunate voter to come to John Harvard's tonight after this event to continue the conversation.
Whoa, beer is like not a hard persuasion topic, but we will, John Harvard's maybe has sticky floors or something gross, so we'll allow it. All right, ready, set, the timer is on, go.
Sure, so what brought you here this evening?
I am interested in radical education and local organizing.
Awesome, great.
Use the mics, yeah.
Sure. Do you think that there are people in this room who you might have something to learn from, who you might be able to connect with?
Yeah, I think probably.
Awesome, great.
Do this, yeah, it's gonna be great, okay.
So before you came to this session, did you have plans for what you were thinking you would do after you left here this evening?
Yeah, I actually do have plans after. I'm going to dinner at a friend's house.
Who's your friend?
My friend Nyasha.
Okay, so does Nyasha know that you're here this evening?
I'm not sure she does, actually.
Okay. Do you think Nyasha would be surprised if she found out that you were here this evening? Does she know this is the type of thing you'd be at?
No, I don't think she'd be too surprised.
Okay. So if you imagine calling Nyasha and telling her, I can't come to dinner tonight because I gotta continue the conversation with these folks I met at resistance school, what do you think she'd say?
I think she'd be supportive of that. Yeah, I think she would probably not be surprised.
Yeah? So since we still have 30 seconds left, do you think you could pick up your phone and call Nyasha now and just give her a heads up?
Take it now! All right, stay up here. Okay. What was that was epic and on time. What was awesome about that? What was different from how you guys normally persuade people? I can tell you what's different from how I normally persuade people. Let's hear from folks we haven't heard from, actually. Up front, yeah.
She used some of the words of her, the person she was talking to, and channeled that energy towards her overall goal.
Yeah, almost back to that Tim McCarthy values presentation, right? You use their same values and their same words, and you can create linkages, and it didn't feel. It felt authentic.
Yeah,
she was actually
it's not
listening.
like she didn't have counter arguments as to it's not like she said, you should do this.
Yeah.
It was more like
learning,
moving her towards options.
Yep. Okay. What else was good about that? Anyone else? Yep, right there behind.
She asked lots of questions and brought her into the conversation right away. There was no lecturing from the get-go.
How many statements did she make? Almost zero. So the crazy thing is, all of us think that policy facts, if we were, genuinely, I'm not kidding, I'm mimicking all of you back to yourselves. If you were trying to persuade this person naturally to support paid parental leave, most of us would probably automatically launch into facts. How many people feel unequipped to have that conversation without facts? I do. And I'm a professional organizer, right? What actually ends up scientifically, behaviorally, in every study we've ever done, convincing people is either asking them questions, identifying shared values, and repeating it back to them, or stories. So you didn't really use a story, but did anyone else have a person that used a story? You guys had a person. We're going to have one quick thank you. Round of applause for you guys. We're going to have one last debrief from someone who used a story, and then we're going to wrap up with my little adorable, unforgettable acronym for how you can remember how to do this when you're feeling all lizard brain. So you guys used a story where I'm not going to make you come up, but tell us what you were persuading each other on. And hi to everyone that's on camera and that's attending from all over the world. I hope that you had wonderful persuasion conversations with yourselves as well, awkwardly. Okay.
They volunteered, but it was my story.
Oh my gosh, you were overhearing the super persuasive. Okay, what was your story?
I was the persuader.
Yeah.
What they asked me to persuade them of was to support school vouchers.
Okay.
And I started out leading with some fact and posing some general ideas. But then I remembered that my personal growing up and my education, I was taken out of a school and put into a school that was separate and special.
Okay.
And it dramatically changed. It altered my whole entire life because I was exposed to children from backgrounds and economic strata and all sorts of things that I wouldn't have had otherwise. And they started getting interested in that story.
And who was your persuadable voter that you were persuading?
The parents.
The parents. Yeah. And okay, hand the microphone to the parents. What did you feel when your persuader organizer got like kind of personal and vulnerable with you?
I liked the story. It
Why?
was a good story. I guess it was something that I could relate to.
Okay. Yeah, it felt relatable. She asked like a question. No, it's okay to relate, yeah. So stories, we relate to stories as humans. It's like the oldest trick in the book. Okay, beautiful. So let's just get to this one last little gorgeous tactics that's gonna make you charming at the doors of all these people that you engage with. And we already talked about this. It is called IRS. Why do I call it IRS as an acronym? I call it IRS because no one ever forgets the IRS. And it's unforgettable, and it works along with the words. So the words that you're gonna remember as you are on the doorsteps of these persuadable members of Congress or persuadable voters in the districts of these members of Congress, and you're trying to organize events that are gonna, create an ecosystem around them where they understand they have to do a given thing, whether it's vote for a policy or it's vote for a candidate, is inquire, is the I. And sorry, I had to have 15 slides, so I cut this down from 56. So there's not, so I couldn't actually write IRS, I should have. Inquire is I. You wanna get to know the person across from you. A really good salesperson who's trying to sell whatever, a vacuum, a candidate, doesn't say like, you really need this vacuum because it's the strongest vacuum. They say like, what don't you like about your vacuum today, right? Or car. That sounds way more cynical than I meant it to. R, relate. Beautiful. The people who naturally did the good persuadable sessions, whether it was like someone telling their personal story or it was, hey, come to this bar because your friend might like it, they actually shared a little bit of themselves and said like, yeah, you identified this thing. I listened to you, I inquired, I got to know actually where you stand as a real human being. And here is why I relate. My values are the same values as your values. And sometimes it takes a ton of strength internally. It was really hard for me back when I was like trying to get through my own biases and my own anger about everything that happened to my family and my cousin and in the Middle Eastern conflicts and like all these different persuadable conversations I've even had to have personally. I had to really steel myself and say, I really want to understand the person across from me. I'm gonna clear my ego for a second, have an observing ego, really try to inquire enough to understand you, and then I'm gonna take the effort to really relate to you as a human. I understand what it means to feel like you want a place that is your home, whatever it is. And then the last S is share. So once you relate, what do you share with this person? This gets back to Tim McCarthy's point, right, about shared values and how we identify them and what our own values are. This not only, fun fact, is the scientific way to persuade elected officials, persuadable voters, and people to, like, quote unquote, be on your side. It is the big D democratic way that we weave together real governable, strong democracies where there's consensus on actually sticky issues. Like the school voucher issue is a fantastic example of that. There is a lot of tension on the progressive side, on the conservative side, in between, on whether charter schools or not make sense for different people in different scenarios. And one of my outside critiques of that is that we're not doing a whole lot of listening across the aisles in smart, shoulder-down ways. So IRS, you will never forget it, inquire, relate, share. Persuasion is at the key. If you take anything away from this session, it's at the heart of what we need to do now to engage these persuadable voters who are the middle third of our democracy that went unengaged in the 2016 election and must be like authentically engaged in the 2018 and 2020 elections if we're gonna win. And if we're gonna win these policy fights in between and make bills become laws and ideas become policy, like we don't have enough people, whether you're a conservative or you're a Democrat, to do this on your own. And all the siloed social media tools and emails and mobilizing strategies that so many of us professionals they have failed you as citizens. They failed me as a citizen. And so the onus is on you, unfortunately and fortunately, to fix this. And the onus is on you to hold accountable us as political professionals when we do stuff that's just stupid and that doesn't make sense for our democracy. And the onus is on you as students at a professional school that's training the citizens of our next generation at all the schools that are watching across the country. We don't have schools for organizers. Most public policy schools, and I taught at one for a while, at graduate school, they don't teach people any of these things. And they don't equip people to actually change our democracy and enact policy and persuade voters and build campaigns that are meaningful and that reflect the values of the outcomes, in the process that we're all trying to achieve. So I know I jumped around to a lot of different topics in 15 slides with a ton of energy at like 8:40 on a Wednesday night, depending on what time zone you're in. But I hope that this is just the start of a longer conversation that you have with yourself about what you're willing to sacrifice and what you're really willing to lean into and what discomfort you're willing to endure to have meaningful shoulders down conversations with people who fundamentally disagree with us but do share the same values. I really fundamentally think that we all want the same things more or less in our country right now, and we are at more risk than we've ever been of sinking into a civil war, the likes of which my dad's country saw, unless we figure out how to do this respectfully, authentically, and smartly, and for ourselves. And it's not something that I could holistically cover in an hour and 40 minutes. Marshall Gans is gonna really dig deep. I love him, he's an idol of mine, into the personal narrative, the relating and sharing part of this, and a little bit of the inquiry part of being a persuadable person in the world and being a real community organizer. Tim McCarthy talked about the values part, so hopefully you have some good tools to identify what values you have. And then Michael Blake will rouse us all and end this session with some really fantastic tips and tools for coalition building, which is another thing we need to do a lot better as progressives, as conservatives, and as Americans if we're gonna stop mourning and start organizing and passing policies that help all of us. So thank you so much for having me tonight. Big round of applause for all of you. Yay. Okay.
Hey, thank you so much, Sarah, for such an engaging and amazing session. We're going to take a couple questions from Twitter. Thank you to everyone who's been sending them in. So the first question is from Ellie in Ohio. Can we talk about how to re-engage our neighbors after we wore them out with months of protests?
Oh, wow. Interesting. That's interesting. So Ellie, I'm curious to hear more. I would like to do more inquiry, but I can't because this is a Twitter question about why you feel like we wore them out with protest. But I think that it sounds like it's a real experience that you've had. I think my really simple tip for you would be to ask them. And if there are neighbors who feel like you've worn out with protests, sit down and say, hey, can I have a 20-minute conversation? Can I invite you over for coffee? I'm really trying to figure out how I can be a better member of our community here in XYZ place. And I'd love to hear your thoughts. And then ask them open-ended questions. And don't do the type of open-ended questions where I do this sometimes where I'm like, I'm going to ask a question that I already know the answer to and make you give the answer. But actually shoulders down, ask them, how have you reacted to these last few months? What's worrying you? What's exciting you? Why? And really try to understand where they're at. And then I think you can I know you'll authentically build a sense. And you can use the worksheet that's in the session 2 materials too, to use some of that data to build an authentic campaign that truly engages them, doesn't engage where you think they are.
Great. And our last question is from Kim in Maine. She asks, How do we agree on which issues to advocate on? We are so fragmented with so many needs and issues.
Yeah, I had this problem. I mean, after the election, I sort of like jokingly called myself a revolutionary because I just was so scared personally. And again, I only speak for myself, but that like we're women going to be attacked first. We're Muslims going to be attacked first. We're immigrants. We're going to be attacked first. And so I felt like I had to be kind of everywhere all at once and work on every issue. And then I got super exhausted and kind of didn't do justice to any issue. I think one of the most exciting things that I've seen happen right now in the organizing space, and I keep like pointing to this corner of the screen, is that there are many more multi-issue advocacy groups cropping up out of the grassroots than there ever have been in progressive, at least progressive history. I don't know too much about the conservative landscape. So Indivisible is amazing. I think they're doing fantastic multi-issue advocacy work, and it sort of allows you to lean into, this week I want to do ACA stuff, but next week, like climate might be the call to action, or the week after, the Muslim ban might be the call to action, but you're building the same muscle and the same team of people that are local and in your neighborhood that you can rely on for everything. OFA, that I love. I'm obviously an OFA alum. OFA still has chapters across the country, and I don't know, 13 million people in their email list and all that jazz that they're rousing on multi-issue advocacy campaigns. And then members of Congress, particularly in like bluer states, but even in some purple states, do some really interesting multi-issue advocacy work. And so I would say, like, don't exhaust yourself. Take it slow when you start to lose your voice, as I am about to. Take a couple days off. Don't let them take away your joy, too, in this resistance, because if they've taken away your joy, then they've taken away everything. And lean into the multi-issue stuff unless it really stresses you out. Cool.
Thank you so much.
Yay. So I'm going to kick it over, I think, to Seth, who's going to close this out. We're going to stick around in the room if folks want to have a in-person conversation. I'm going to hang out here, but you can leave if you're tired. I'm also going to be taking questions from Twitter for like the next 2 days. So if you're online and we didn't get to interact because of the tech, I'll answer your questions for the next few days. Just tweet at me. If you're in the room and want to hang, we're going to hang out over here, and Seth's going to close us out. So big round of applause for our awesome organizer resistance school. We're done. Woo!
Thank you, Sara, for that high energy and motivating session. Tonight, Sara drove home the immense power of citizen activism. She led us through the tools that we need to secure both issue-based and electoral wins, from discussing our shared values to using persuasion to advocate for the causes we care about. These are the tools that keep this exciting resurgence of grassroots organizing alive in the upcoming months and years. And they are the tools that will open the door for deeper engagement in our democratic system. The skills Sara showcased tonight will help you bring more people grounded in shared values together. As a group, you can now plan your group's strategic action and figure out what that means for who needs to be in the room with you in preparation for the next session of Resistance School. Next week, we're honored to be joined by Marshall Gans, an expert with decades of experience in grassroots organizing, in part as former director of organizing for the United Farm Workers. Professor Gans will lead us through a training that will bring your group into a common purpose and will equip all of you to take strategic action collectively. He'll show us the importance of defining a leadership structure for your group and take us through the steps of creating that structure in a way that will allow your group to build power over time and utilize the resources that you all bring to the movement. The worksheet that Sara just mentioned, Taking Strategic Action Now, will help ensure you get the most out of that training. Our team has put together a guide to help you bridge the lessons from the first and second sessions in order to prepare for next week. All of these materials will be readily accessible on our website, and as always, feel free to reach out if you have any questions that you may have or that your group may have. Thank you again for joining us tonight. We can't wait to see you for our third session of Resistance School, when we'll dive into how to structure and build capacity for action. Thank you. See you next week.